And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavon, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Andrew Johnson, as we are now, Johnson, through the NFL regular season. This past weekend, Week 18 wrapped up, and we now know the postseason matchups for this year's NFL postseason, and a lot to break down here on the show as to who exactly made it, what teams just missed out as of this past weekend, and we also have some NFL coaching news as well to get to here on the show today. And we'll discuss a little bit in detail about what vacancies so far that is currently at the head coaching position for the current 6 teams, at least, that are currently without a head coach. Which one's probably the most attractive for any one of these coaches going in this upcoming offseason?
Yeah, a lot of great jobs, and there's a lot of heartbreak over the weekend for some of these teams. Uh, Maybe some can call it revenge games, some bittersweet moments, and some sighs of relief for other teams. But I'll let you go straight into it, Nick.
Yeah, well, I guess let's start off with the doubleheader that happened on Saturday, and that pitted the two AFC North matchups that we had. And that first matchup was the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens. Kind of went the way you expected this game to go. Baltimore really just dominates this game in every single aspect you could pretty much imagine. They were able to win 35-10 over the Browns. They clinched the AFC North with the victory, and they go back into the postseason as a division title, winner, potential favorite maybe as well in the AFC. Can be very tough as well with teams like Buffalo and Kansas City, and some of the wild card teams as well in that conference. But with that win, Johnson, it then led to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They, unfortunately, because of the Ravens win, would mathematically be eliminated from winning the division, so they're automatically going to be a wild card team in this year's NFL playoffs. And they are going into this playoffs not on the highest of streaks right now. They have lost now 4 straight games after they fell to the Bengals on Saturday night, 19-17. Had a chance towards the end to go down the field and maybe get the game-winning field goal. They were not able to do so. Their offense has really looked bad these last couple of weeks. It's definitely a eyesore for them going into the postseason. And funny enough for them, they will be taking on their division rival Baltimore Ravens in the wild card matchup to begin the NFL playoffs.
Yeah, we would talk about perhaps the Chiefs looking like the 2021 Steelers, but it turns out the 2024 Steelers are the 2021 Steelers.
Yeah.
Not looking pretty. Russell Wilson had a couple of games where he looks like Seattle Russ, and he was doing really well. And it's been on him the last couple of games because I get it. The defense haven't been playing up to their standard, but when the offense has been put them in this situation over the last 4 or 5 games, the defense is going to take a step back. So I would actually put the blame on Russell Wilson here.
I think it's a lot of blame. He definitely deserves some of it. The play calling hasn't been great as well these last couple of weeks, so that definitely goes on the head of Arthur Smith. They haven't really been able to run the football as effectively as they had all season long.
Well, they couldn't really never run the football that efficiently.
Najee had another 1,000-yard year, so he was
average. It was average, right?
But they were
able. It wasn't like, oh my god, he's like Aaron Jones or Derrick Henry out there.
And the defense definitely has taken a hit since T.J. Watt got hurt, so I think that's another aspect to it. Their defense looked fine in this game against the Bengals, at least in the second half of that game. The first half, they struggled mightily against Jamar Chase, but they really stepped it up towards the second half and gave the offense a chance to win the game towards the end, but nothing went right for them in that game. And for at least that night, Johnson, they gave the Bengals hope going into Sunday, because with that win, and then forced teams like Miami and Denver to make sure they would win their respective games, because if they had not, the Bengals would have been the last team in. Now, for the Bengals, they got at least got help from one team. That was the New York Jets being the Miami Dolphins, effectively ending their season. So it all came down to what happened in Denver, Colorado between the Broncos and the Chiefs. The Chiefs obviously playing their backups in that matchup, considering they already locked up home field advantage in the postseason. So Chiefs having enough to play for. Bengals hoping that maybe there could be some type of miracle and the Chiefs would get the win and send Cincinnati into the playoffs. That would not be the case. Denver rolls past the Chiefs 38-0 in this matchup. It's the first time since the 2015 season, when the Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl, that the Broncos are back into the postseason, Mark. A little bit of a scary way they got in there, because they had a couple chances beforehand the last couple weeks, were not able to clinch it. They finally get the job done in the final week of the regular season. And as I mentioned, they're back into the playoffs. And a very tough matchup for them in the wild card round as they will go into Buffalo to take on the Bills.
Yeah, a lot of us fans, for I guess fans of Joe Burrow or Patriot fans, are wishing that Week 1 game was reversed right now because, oof, if that was the case, the Bengals would be in the playoffs and the Patriots would have the number 1 overall pick. So
Yep.
that's the real game that's going to come back and haunt maybe the biggest ripple effect coming out of the NFL this season when it comes to just winning a single individual game this season. I think if I had to pick one, it would be that game.
Yeah. I mean, remember in that game, too, they didn't have T. Higgins. They had Jamar Chase in that one, but the offense just did not look anything remotely to what they did the entire rest of the season. They played phenomenal. And people have made the case that do you maybe consider Joe Burrow as an MVP candidate? I think you could consider it, but with them not making
If
the
he made the
playoffs,
playoffs,
right,
if they had made the playoffs, he would be my MVP.
right. I hate that,
My MVP is still Lamar, by the way.
I hate that, he's not going to get as much consideration because they missed the playoffs because it's not his fault that they're not in the playoffs. Their defense is the reason why they did not get into the postseason this year. The amount of games that they had scored like 30 something points and they still lost because the defense gave up 35 or 40 plus. Like, that's the reason why the Bengals are not into the postseason this year. Their defense was that bad. They made a change of defensive coordinator, so we'll see who they hire in the next couple of weeks. And maybe for them, hopefully, that will lead to some changes on the defensive side. So we'll see where they go from here. But as we know, Johnson, that wasn't the.
Joe Burrow.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe Burrow, 4,900 yards, 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He really just carried this entire team on his back. And fortunately, it really wasn't enough.
And Jamar Chase
and
wins
again,
the Triple Crown, too.
It's a very sad story here because as we stand right now, he's the third. Granted, but kind of long. It's a long shot at plus 1,600, but he's the third shortest odds to win MVP right now. It's Joe Burrow at 1,600 plus 1,600, Vince Lamar Jackson at plus 185, Vince Josh Allen minus 250. Again, it depends on what book you go by. Some books have Lamar at plus 200, some have him at plus 300. Same thing with Joe Burrow, plus 2,200, plus 1,600. But you could make the argument here that if the Bengals had won 2 more games, he'd definitely be he would be winning the MVP this year.
Yeah, I think you definitely could make that case. And now I think it's more imperative on the Bengals for the offseason. They have to fix some of these mistakes. I mean, one,
They got to fire Zach Taylor.
Well, I mean, I've said that for a while, but who knows? After this, the way this season ended, it probably won't be anytime soon, unfortunately. They do need to pay Jamar Chase, though, at some point, as well as T. Higgins. So those two future wide receivers, though, that's going to be the biggest question mark for the Bengals this offseason. What do they exactly do? Because you have to pay Chase at this point after the record-breaking season he had this year. And Joe Burrow's been adamant that they need T. Higgins back next season because that offense is completely different without T. Higgins. And Higgins, as of right now, is going to be a free agent this upcoming season. So they have a lot of decisions to make in the offseason. I think Trey Hendrickson, who had the most sacks this season in the NFL, is also coming up on a contract year as well. So the Bengals have some very important decisions coming up in the offseason, and they don't really have as much cap space as they would, had hoped for to try to sign some of these top tier players on their roster. So they are right now in a bad spot where they might be just hovering at the mid tier of the entire AFC and just the entire NFL because they're going to be potentially losing a lot more players. And Burrow might be able to maybe squeak them in as a last wild card, but that might be the best they could possibly get if they don't start improving this roster the next couple of years. So
and I guess only time will tell. It's going to be a big offseason here in Via because for a lot of teams, the offseason started yesterday.
Yeah.
And the next 2 months are really just a formality.
Right. So we'll see where Cincinnati does go from here in their search to figure out what they could do with their roster changes in the next couple of weeks. We did see also, Johnson, the NFC South come down to the final day of the regular season. The Buccaneers took on the Saints. Panthers took on the Falcons, I should say, the other way around. The Falcons took on the Panthers. We mentioned it last week on the show. The Falcons needed to win their game, and they needed the Buccaneers to lose to the Saints. They would clinch the NFC South. If the Buccaneers beat the Saints, they would clinch the South regardless of the 2 losses they had to Atlanta on the season. And Tampa Bay got it done. It was a little bit shaky in that game. They were down 16-6 at halftime. Great second half for Baker Mayfield and company. They get the job done, winning 27-19. Mike Evans also reaching the 1,000 yard marker on the season, tying him with Jerry Rice for 11 straight seasons with 1,000 yards receiving. So Mike Evans will have a chance next season to make some NFL history if he gets another 1,000 yards. But I'm sure he's just happy to be in the playoffs, even regardless of what happened in that game, if he were to get the 1,000 yards or not. Tampa Bay gets into the postseason as the NFC South champions. They eliminate the Falcons, who, even if the Buccaneers lost that game, Atlanta did go on to lose to the Carolina Panthers, so Tampa Bay would have got in regardless. And now the Buccaneers get a very interesting matchup in the wild card round against the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we could go into all the playoff matchups in the mushing hour, but
we'll do the last
I have a lot
final game before we do that. We have one more game.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this. I just want to talk. Yeah, just a little bit about Mike Evans. You said now I've been on the Mike Evans MVP train, not MVP, Hall of Fame case train for probably since about 2019 or so. I saw like maybe 5 or 6 seasons into his career, but he had the opportunity to do something really special here. And the fact that he got 1,000 yards in only 13 games, or was it 14 games? 14 games, right?
I think it was. I think you were
14,
right originally,
right?
13.
13 is even more impressive.
I think he missed 4 games this season. I'll double check for you, but I think he missed 4 games.
And the circumstances of him getting the 1,000 yards is a little bit controversial. If I guess if you hate fun, they said, oh well, they ran a play with the game's pretty much won. The score's 27-19. There's a minute left in the game, and they said, okay, let's run a couple passing plays. Everyone on the Saints knew where the ball was going,
right?
But they couldn't get him. So that's gonna be my argument. Yeah, everybody knew it was going to Mike Evans. So it doesn't. So to me, that just makes it a bit more impressive. That again, it's not like it's a friendly game. It's not like it's the Giants, let's say, playing some team like, I don't know. It's like, let's say Giants Vikings, right? Or maybe not because of the playoff game, but let's say like Patriots. Let's say Patriots Texans, right? There's really no beef between these two teams, right? But the Saints and the Bucks have this bitter rivalry that's been going on for years at this point. Mike Evans always notoriously getting into fights with Marshall and Lattimore. And so the fact that they didn't let this happen, like they did not let him get the 1,000 yards, like this was going to be a pride thing for them. So the fact that it did happen is even more impressive in my opinion.
Well, 2 caveats to this, Johnson. So one, I looked it up. Mike Evans did play 14 games this season, so he did miss 3. It
was 14.
But you mentioned Marshall Lattimore. Can you tell me exactly where Marshall Lattimore currently plays for now?
He plays for the Buccaneers, if I'm not mistaken.
Marshall Lattimore.
No, he doesn't play for the Buccaneers. I'm sorry, excuse me. He was on the Saints, and now he is on the Commanders. That is
He's
what
on
I
the Commanders, who the Buccaneers will be playing this upcoming weekend. So that rivalry that you mentioned,
because I was going to say it.
Yeah, that rivalry that you mentioned is going to be happening in the wild card round. So that would be very interesting to see.
Riders working overtime to get us that matchup 2 times this season.
Yeah, so very, very interesting because Lattimore's been pretty much hurt the entirety of the season. Hopefully he does play in that game, and we get to see that matchup once again.
Oh, he'll play that game out of spite.
Probably.
This is going to be a matchup based just fueled on spite. Spite and probably and a lot of muscle relaxers.
Yeah, probably. Final game that we had, Johnson, of course, was a Sunday night matchup that was the biggest game of the entirety of the season. The Vikings going into Detroit to take on the Detroit Lions. Both teams going into this one 14-2 on the season. Winner would not only win the NFC North, but would get home field advantage throughout the entirety of the NFC playoffs. And the Lions, just capitalizing on a lot of mistakes that the Vikings had in that first half. Yeah, the Vikings as you mentioned it, the Vikings pretty much beat themselves in this game. A couple of drives, they got into the goal line against Detroit, were not able to come away with points. Sometimes they would settle for field goals. They were not even able to get into the end zone at any point in this game. Held to just 9 points in this one. And the biggest story, of course, on the other side of the field for Detroit, Jahmyr Gibbs just once again torching this Vikings defense. 139 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns. Also had a receiving touchdown in this game, 4 for the night for Jahmyr Gibbs, as the Detroit Lions clinched the NFC North and home field advantage in the postseason with a 31-9 victory over the Vikings. And now they go into the playoffs, Johnson, at 15-2. They just received word that they might even get David Montgomery back for the divisional round, which is a huge get for them. As I mentioned last week, the whole purpose of Detroit getting this bye which is try to get some of their players back from the injured reserve. And it looks like that is going to be the case. So they are as if they are already weren't a dangerous team to begin with. They're getting even more scary come postseason time.
Yeah, little fun fact about this team: Aiden Hutchinson, who hasn't played in 12 weeks, leads the team in sacks.
Yeah,
So they are heavily missing pressure on that defensive line. So if they can even give these guys maybe enough of a week or two to just gel without him, that can go a long way too.
and I think they lost. Lee McNeil was number 2 on the team in sacks. He got injured as well this season. I think number 3 now is Darius Smith, who they just recently acquired from the Browns. So he's trying to somewhat fill the void for Aiden Hutchinson not being in that lineup. But they've been able to work, persevere through these injuries so far. And now a remarkable 15-2 on the season, tied for the best record in the entire NFL. And they're right now the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl if the season were to end today. If you look at any sports book, they are the odds-on favorite. So there's a lot going good for
Ever so
Detroit.
slightly, ever so slightly. The Chiefs are right behind them, though.
Yeah, I know. You could go about it either way, but I think everyone wants this. I mean, maybe not everyone wants to see Detroit win. I know some people not a fan of a certain man on that team. I'm not gonna. I you know where I'm going with it, but they've just been a fun team to watch. They're just from top to bottom. Their entire roster has been built perfectly to the standard that they need to get at this point in the season. And we saw how close they came last year. If not for a bad second half, they would have been in the Super Bowl for the first time in their franchise's history. And they've got a chance to redeem themselves this year. And for them, every game will be played at Ford Field, at least for them, for the entirety of these playoffs.
Ford Field. Don't you mean the Pontiac Dome?
The Silver Dome.
Silver Dome, excuse me.
Yes.
The Pontiac Silver Dome.
Yeah. A certain real American loves the Pontiac Silver Dome.
Yeah, some say a French giant from the Alps also loves that place.
That's true. So that does wrap up our recap of what happened in Week 18. But Johnson, as I mentioned, when you have the last week of the regular season come down to the wire, that's not the only news you get out of the regular season finale, because you get those head coaching news from teams that didn't make the playoffs this season, and we saw 3 new openings head up. Now remember, if you remember going into the offseason, there were already 3 openings in the NFL before the regular season ended. You had the Saints fired Dennis Allen, the Jets fired Robert Saleh earlier in the season, and the Chicago Bears fired Matt Eberflus before the season ended. So you already had those 3 openings before the regular season ended. And then, as we've seen in the last couple of days, 3 new head coaching news has been made. We saw Doug Pearson get fired by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Gerard Mayo got fired from the New England Patriots. And just as of a couple hours ago, Antonio Pierce was fired by the Las Vegas Raiders. The only news, Johnson, that we're still waiting to see on is the situation going on in Dallas with Mike McCarthy. The Bears have requested to interview him. I think it was yesterday they requested that interview, and they still have not been given permission by Dallas. So we don't know if Dallas is going to be the 7th team or not to have a head coach hiring in this offseason period, or they're just going to keep McCarthy and we're down to these 6 teams. But regardless of that, we right now have 6 teams that are without a head coach. And I think, obviously one of the teams is the team that you're a fan of, but would you say that's the most lucrative job going right now for any of these, potential future head coaches, like guys like Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel back on the market as well? We've heard what's going on with the Jets. Maybe they bring back Rex Ryan. Some just guys like that, just in general. What's the most lucrative job, in your opinion, that's for some of these candidates that are trying to become potentially one day NFL head coach?
It's the Patriots job. I'm going to say it's the Patriots job only because if you're a proven head coach, let's say Mike Vrabel does go to the Patriots, right? Let's say he does come home.
I feel like
where he had a
storied
storied career
for that to happen, but yeah.
So I mean, he didn't take a job last season for a reason. Probably he probably knew this. Maybe he had a handshake deal with Bob Kraft or something like that.
Maybe.
That he'd get fired after one season, no matter what. Yada yada. But if you're Mike Vrabel, you're coming to the team with a somewhat proven rookie quarterback, right? So he's the second or third best quarterback in the draft right now. I would say. I would
Yeah,
say Jane Daniels is definitely one. I would say Bo Nix is two, and then you could make the argument that he had better rookie season than Caleb Williams. You can make that argument.
I would. I think Caleb Williams right now is the fourth best rookie. Yeah, fourth. Yeah, he's fourth. He's fourth. I was trying to think of it, but yeah, he was the way he played for the majority of the season. Williams is the fourth best quarterback that was drafted last year.
Yeah, so that's the way I
That was
would
the
look
number
at
one
it.
pick.
So you have the number 3 pick, right? You have a quarterback, which this is who you got to ride with, right? You get to pick your OC in DC, right? And you have tens of millions of dollars in cap space, and you have an owner that's a little impatient, right? He's in win now mode. So if you're Mike Vrabel, you walk into the Patriots job day one, you could build your offensive line. I mean that's a position he's very familiar with. You can get you can even do it for the drafts. Get someone like, let's say, like who's the tackle out of Michigan? Is it
You want
Johnson?
Mason Graham? Talking about
Is it Mason Graham?
Mason Graham's the defensive lineman. Will Johnson's the corner.
Will Johnson is the corner. So yeah,
Yes.
you could go Will Johnson at corner, right, to kind of get your backfield a little bit better, or you can buy offensive linemen in the off season. You also go in the draft and take an offensive lineman. But
And
the point is,
there's a lot of good.
there's a lot of options here.
Right. I think the good thing for New England is that the positions that you guys need it's all in this draft. There is corner depth, there is receiver depth, there's offensive line depth. Like the positions that you really desperately need, it's in the draft. And if you can't get it in the draft, there should be some free agents that you could definitely, look at that.
This is going to sound crazy.
Like, yes.
If you're New England, let's say they want Travis Hunter in the worst way, right? And they're the 4th pick, and they're not going to get Travis Hunter.
With the 4th pick, they have to trade up.
Yeah, they have to trade up. It's not going to happen at the 4th pick. Do you consider trading down to get some other draft value? Because this is just such a loaded draft.
It depends because, if you're New England, like, is there a guy at 4 that you are enamored with? Because you could go McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, if you want, because you need a wide receiver. You could go Will
I think
Johnson.
You could trade down and get him at 9.
Maybe. I don't know, because I think the problem with that is the Raiders could take him because right now they're not in a position to take a quarterback. They would have to trade up. The Jets could take him at 7 because they need receiver because they're probably not going to have Devontae Adams next season, if I had to guess. The Panthers would be in a position to take him as well at 8 because they need some help for Bryce Young. So do you look at him at number 4 and say, you know what, we probably just have to take him at this spot because after him, what's the next best receiver on the entirety of the board? Is it Luther Burden from Missouri? Like, do you like him a lot more that maybe you were willing to trade down later in the draft to get more assets and then look at someone at pick, I don't know, let's say if they wanted to trade down to like maybe like in the teens, like the 12 to 15 range. Do you like a guy at linebacker or someone on the offensive line or defensive line a lot more to taking a guy like McMillan or Mason Graham or Will Johnson with a top 4 pick? That's what really it comes down to. And
am I crazy to think that they should buy their offensive line, right? And then take someone like Genty, like trade down, take Genty? Am I crazy for thinking that?
It's not the worst idea. I think the problem is also it's going to come down to what you do in free agency. I think whatever you do in free agency is going to come down to what you do in the draft. Like, because look at this. So think about this. The Patriots are going to go into this offseason with the most cap space in the NFL. They have around 126 mil. So that's a lot of cap space. They can work with anything going into this. And I mentioned earlier, you could have a T. Higgins on the market. That's a phenomenal number 1 option for Drake May if you were to get him. You have Trey Smith, the guard from the Chiefs. That's some instant offensive line protection for him. You could go Chris Godwin, because we don't know what his future is coming off the injury, and Tampa Bay hasn't paid him, so he's going to be a free agent, and I think that would be a solid get as well. And
so I love how you're mentioning all these proven wide receivers. I'll let you finish your point, Bill.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, you have these guys, you go corner, like guys like DJ Reed or Travarius Ward, Ronnie Stanley at tackle. Like, there's a bunch of players in free agency that the Patriots could set their mark on to start free agency. And then once if they're able to get a couple of those guys, then if you really wanted an Ashton Genty, like why not just trade down and maybe go get him? Because
That's
you
what I'm
don't have
saying
to.
here.
You don't have to take him at 4. You could easily take him at a pick like 13, 14, or 15. He'll probably be there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm in favor of buying your offensive line, right? So let's say you get 4 or 5 offensive linemen, right? Because I think those will be the first guys to kind of come off the board in any free agency, right? It's going to be the offensive line. The receivers will hold out a little bit. The running backs will hold out a little bit. And let's face the facts. The Patriots have never drafted a good wide receiver, at least in the last 25 years. The only good wide receiver they drafted was Julian Edelman. That was because he really liked him as an athlete.
I will
that,
say
that is the sole reason that
I
happened.
will say I think what's a good thing for New England, and I saw what he did towards the end of the season, and I really think you have something in him, maybe as a slot guy. Keyshawn Booty looked pretty good the last couple of weeks of the season. I think
He did look pretty good, but he's a good third wide receiver.
Right.
Though.
I think he's a perfect slot receiver for Drake May. They need a number 1 guy though.
So what I'm saying, if I'm New England, I buy my tackles, right? I go on and buy my tackles. You have a cheap quarterback. That's how you win in this league. You win the league by underpaying your quarterback. You get a quarterback on his rookie deal. You get a guy like Genty who is proven commodity in college. So that's what the Patriots really struggled was running the ball because Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson were average this year. They weren't great. They weren't bad. But they were average to below average. So if you get your rookie quarterback, a stud running back that has a fantastic offensive line, and if they buy some wide receivers, right? Like you said, you get T. Higgins, you get Chris Godwin. It's very realistic that they do go this route. I think it's more and more of a possibility the more I'm talking about it. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But the more I talk about it out loud, the more I'm kind of talking myself into it right now because you get a cheap running back, you get a cheap quarterback, which are, let's say, above average, and then a great offensive line takes above average quarterback, above average running back to great status, at least in my opinion, because they can really carry a team.
Yeah.
And then if you have some wide receivers and you're like you said, you have Keyshawn Booty already in the slot and he's proven there. You have potential to maybe win 10, 11 games next year. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's if the stars align.
I mean, listen, you need baby steps because look at Denver. I mean, last season they were a terrible team. They didn't even have a first round pick until they traded up. And then you got to think about what they did. Like, they went from a team this season that was supposed to projected to be. A lot of people thought they were going to be the worst team in the NFL, and they finished with 10 wins and they made the playoffs as a wild card. So it's all about baby steps at this point. You have to, go from you're in a spot where you won 4 games, try to work your way up to 7, then you work the next season up to getting into the postseason. Like that's what it needs to be done for a team like New England. And I think you could also make the case that works for a team like a Chicago. I think, in my opinion, that if not New England is the best attractive job, probably Chicago, I think, would be the next most attractive job because they're also in a situation where they're going to have a lot of cap space going into the offseason. They desperately need offensive line help, which I think is the biggest thing going for them. A top 10 pick, so they could go in the draft to get it. They could go into free agency, as I mentioned, some of the guys that are already there in this upcoming free agency class. And listen, I know Caleb Williams didn't have the greatest year, but if you give him an offensive-minded coach, which Chicago desperately needs to do because they've been going defensive-minded coaches for how many years now? If they go with a guy, if they're able to get a guy like Ben Johnson, like Caleb Williams could really have a phenomenal sophomore season potentially. You still have DJ Moore. You're going to still have Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. You still have a good trio of receivers. And it really comes down to if he could develop Caleb in his second season, then the Bears could really jump up from a 5-win team to next season being that team that wins 8 or 9 games, maybe sneaks in as a last wild card, or just misses the playoffs, and the year next after, they're a team to be reckoned with in the NFC.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with the points you made there, but I think that sums up, at least in my opinion. I want to talk about the Patriots. You can go into a couple more teams if you want, but I have, I guess we can just go into the Bushing Hour if you're ready.
Yeah, we can, because I think the problem with the other teams also is, like, if you look at the other 4 that we didn't mention, the Jets are in turmoil right now. Like, we don't know what the quarterback situation is and the rest of the roster itself. Saints is pretty
Raiders
much...
Raiders.
The Saints' situation, literally, the Saints have the same situation with quarterback. The Raiders have the same situation with quarterback. And the last team I'm already
Quarterback and
losing
cap
is
space.
Jacksonville. And I mean, you have the quarterback, but Trent Baalke is still your GM. I don't really see a future right now with that team.
It's a very expensive quarterback.
Yeah, listen. I mean, you can work around it. I think Trevor Lawrence is still fine, but the rest of the roster itself was really bad this season. At least Brian Thomas looked phenomenal in his rookie year, so at least you have that going for you. But Travis Etienne took a huge drop down from the year prior. I don't know what happened to him. They need a new vocal leader in that locker room, and I'm just not sure who exactly it might be for Jacksonville in the year after. So the other four teams are just all question marks. That's the problem for them. We don't know exactly what they're going to be. The Patriots and the Bears at least give you some sort of
Some
listen. You
hope.
got a young quarterback. You have all this cap space. You have a top 10 draft pick, and if as long as you're able to hire the right guy to mentor your young quarterback, the sky's the limit for both of your franchises. So I think that's why you and I look at those two teams being the more lucrative teams to look at going into this offseason for any potential head coach opportunity. So with that
Yeah,
being said,
that's
let's
well put.
yeah. So like that, let's with that, Johnson. Let's go into the mushing hour for the NFL Wild Card Weekend. A very stacked Wild Card week. A lot of big games going on. A divisional matchup rematch. We have a rematch from Week 1 in the regular season. Actually, a couple of rematches we've had from this regular season entirely. I think only 2 games we have during the Wild Card Weekend are non-regular season rematches. So a lot of familiarity from these entire regular season and the non-two playoff matchups, regular season matchups, I should say, are pretty good matchups as well. So let's dive into the matchups for this wild card weekend, and let's start off with the first game of wild card weekend. That's happening on Saturday in Houston, Texas, as the Los Angeles Chargers go into Houston to take on those Houston Texans. Chargers are on the road, but are a 3-point favorite in this game. The over-under at 42.5 for this one. Can the Chargers get it done, Johnson, to move on?
Chargers -3. I don't believe in CJ Stroud's in his sophomore slump. I don't think he comes out of it right now. So give me Chargers -3. Give him the experienced coach. Give me the experienced quarterback in this situation.
Yeah, the Texans I've not been impressed with this entire playoff, and I'm very concerned. Or regular season, I should say. Sorry. I'm just I don't know. I don't really like where they're heading towards in this playoff format because they've had so many injuries. You know, the winner of the game is going to have to go into Kansas City. I think if you look at the teams, the Chargers would give the Chiefs probably more of a difficult matchup with the two. So I hate to do this to you, Chargers, but I'm going to be on the same side as Johnson as well. I'm going to go with the Chargers -3 to win this game, I think, too. I just like what they're doing more than what the Texans have been doing these last couple of weeks. It's all about momentum going into this playoffs, and I think the Chargers compared to the Texans just have more of it. So give me Los Angeles to get the job done. What's the second game that we have on Saturday?
We have the Steelers going on against the Ravens. The Ravens are at home and they are a 10-point favorite in the over-under slate at 43.5. Steelers +10. I'm going to keep on picking them until they do it. So don't fail
Gotta
me
see
now,
one go
just like the
through.
last 4 weeks. I got to see one go through.
I'm going Ravens -10. The Steelers have shown me nothing to give me any faith that they're going to at least win
And I
this
think that's the
game.
sensible pick. But
I do think this will be a slugfest. I will say that. I think this is going to be a really low scoring game between the two. Um, but I just don't have any faith in Pittsburgh right now to at least keep it close. Their offenses look putrid. Don't be surprised. I mean, if they really start struggling, maybe they try to go back to Justin Fields for a couple plays just to see maybe they get some kind of spark. They should have been doing that to begin with, in my opinion, the last couple weeks, but they just kept going with just Russell Wilson. So I don't know. I don't know. We'll see what happens in that game. Now, shifting our focus into the Sunday slate, Johnson, 3 games on Sunday, and it all kicks off in Orchard Park as the Denver Broncos will take on the Buffalo Bills. Bills at home are an 8.5-point favorite, over under at 46.5 for this game.
give me Bills -8.5 here. Denver, congrats, you had a week off. You beat a second string Chiefs team, but the Bills get it done at home here, and they're going to cover.
I'm going to go with Bills to cover, and I'm going to go with the over as well. I think these are two sneaky good offensive teams we've seen all season. Like, you look at Denver, and you'd immediately think their defense is, they've been phenomenal this season, don't get me wrong, but you're facing an MVP favorite right now in Josh Allen to a lot of people's eyes. Your offense is at least doing good this season. They've been enough for you to get the job done. I am maybe a little bit concerned that Bo Nix might make a couple mistakes because it is obviously his playoff debut. You're going into a very hostile environment in Buffalo, taking on that fan base. I think the Broncos could put up a good amount of points, but I just think that there might be mistakes that Bo Nix makes, and maybe they just, the game gets away from them. Maybe they score a garbage time touchdown to at least get the over job done. So I will take the Bills to cover as well as the over for that game in Orchard Park. What's our next game that we have on Sunday?
We have the Green Bay Packers going into Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. The Eagles are the home team, and they are a 4.5-point favorite. Over underslated at 44.5. Eagles minus 4.5 here. I think this is an easy cover.
I don't know.
Especially after that Sunday debacle, I'm taking the Eagles.
I know. The Packers had a really bad end of the regular season that lost to the Bears. Obviously, we saw what happened in week 1 with these two teams, Johnson. The infamous game in Brazil, the first game in the NFL in Brazil. And that game came down to the wire. The Eagles held on by 5. We saw Jordan Love get injured in that game. Saquon Barkley's first game in the Eagle went pretty phenomenal for the Eagles in that game. A.J. Brown went off in that game as well. The biggest news, obviously, for the Eagles is Jalen Hurts, it looks like, is going to be healthy enough to play this game, which is a huge get for them because he's been out the last couple of weeks in the concussion protocol. So that's at least a good sign for them. I still think the Packers are going to surprise people because we saw what happened last year. They were the 7th seed. They actually won a playoff game and almost won again the next week. I think they keep this game close. I don't know. I think they're going to keep it close. I'm going to go with Green Bay plus 4.5 in this game. I don't know if they're going to win it, but I do think if they were to lose, it's by at least a field goal. So give me Green Bay in that game against Philadelphia on the road. Maybe, for my sake, hopefully they get the job done and get the victory. The final game that we have on the Sunday slate is Sunday Night Football. Another rematch that we had this season also that happened in the week 1 of the National Football League season as the Washington Commanders go into Tampa Bay to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers in this game are a 3-point favorite. The over-under at 50.5 for this game.
Ooh.
Tough one.
This is a tough one. This is a very tough one. But I'm going to take the Bucs here. I'm going to take the experienced quarterback. I'm going to take the experienced wide receivers. I'm going to take, I guess, the more experienced head coach, question mark. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's
I think the Bucs minus 3.
Todd Bowles versus Dan Quinn. I mean, their track records aren't the greatest, but I mean, Dan Quinn has proven to gone to a Super Bowl before, so I guess at least he has that. 28.
Hey, Todd Bowles won a playoff game one time.
He did last year. He did last year.
Yeah, he won a playoff game.
Yeah, they destroyed the Eagles.
And to be fair, he also played with the Jets at first. He also was coaching the Jets.
Yeah, he had no chance with the Jets. I know.
So, he doesn't have a chance.
Yeah. Tell you what, I don't know. I'm gonna go Commanders. I'm gonna go Commanders plus 3. I really think they could win this game. I've liked what I've seen out of this team. I know. I know that it's another rookie quarterback going on the road. I think it's a tough environment. We saw what happened the first time these two teams played. A lot of points were scored. For that reason, I'm also going to go with the over in this game as well. I think these, the defenses for these two teams are a bit shaky, so I could see a lot of points being scored in this game. And I really just think if you look top to bottom, I think Washington just has a little bit better, production-wise, because obviously the best receiver on the field is going to be Mike Evans. But Commanders have themselves a good receiver as well in Terry McLaurin. And if you're looking at next best options, you probably look at the Commanders receivers more than Tampa Bay's guys because without Chris Godwin, they really haven't had that number 2 receiver on the team the entirety of the season. So I think if you're Washington, I think you have to look at it as, I think, we have the better receivers, more than likely the better tight end between Ertz and Auden. I think their defense is slightly better than Tampa Bay's as well. So I got Washington to cover and the over. I think the Commanders flat out win the game entirely, but I'm not going to take the money line just for my sake to at least keep my record close. So I'll go with Washington to cover that game on Sunday Night Football. And then, Johnson, what rounds us out on Monday Night Football to round out Wild Card Weekend?
We have Minnesota Vikings, despite winning 14 games, are on the road against the LA Rams. The Rams are at home, but will there be more Vikings fans there? Probably.
Probably.
Vikings are 1.5 point favorite. 47.5 is the slated over under. Despite all of that, the Vikings, after their last performance, and the Rams have been playing better as late, but really not after their last game. This is a really hard pick. I think this is really a true pick 'em, so I think they got it right here. Give me Rams plus 1.5 because I think they could win the game, and if they lose on a heartbreaking field goal by a point, I'm covered. So, give me Rams plus 1.5.
Well, if you remember when these two teams played the last time, it was in Week 8, and the Vikings had come off that loss to Detroit. They were 5-1 this season, and the Rams were the favorite going into that game, and no one could understand why the Rams were the favorite in that game. And the Rams flat out proved it in that game, winning 30-20 in Los Angeles. So another rematch from the regular season this year. And I've been against them all year, Johnson. I'm going to just give them the benefit of the doubt this time around. I'm going to go with the Vikings minus 1.5. I think they'll want some revenge from that game. And I think the biggest thing for them, the only thing that scares me for them in this game is, are they going to look ahead? Because obviously the winner will play Detroit the week after. And you know the Vikings are going to want a third matchup with this team to get some revenge from this regular season. And I think what it comes down to is, the scriptwriter is going to have a phenomenal time writing the story, because you're either going to get Vikings lines for a third time this season, or you're going to have Matthew Stafford once again returning to Detroit for a Detroit Lions home playoff game. So regardless, the scriptwriter has done a phenomenal job once again getting to this point of the season and giving us a good matchup in the divisional round. I just think the Vikings will get some revenge in this game from earlier on in the regular season. If you remember, there was the missed face mask call on Sam Darnold that was missed by the referees, and the Rams took advantage and won the game because of it. I think the Vikings get it done in this one. They get the revenge, and they'll get that third matchup with Detroit the week after.
But I think that wraps up our mushing hour, and I have nothing more to say unless you would like to add something.
Just for us, I mean, we're you and I got a long off season with our teams in terms of trying to fix the debacle that we've had this season. Both of us, unfortunately, had a chance at the number 1 overall pick, and we both blew it. So, here we are.
Yep.
Here we are. So, congratulations to the Giants. They got the number 1 pick. I will say, Johnson, though. Go ahead.
I'm going to say it's going to be very interesting. One of these guys pull an Eli and force their way out of one of these locations.
Yeah, I think this is the most intriguing draft I think we've seen. Because I mentioned a couple weeks ago that the Browns and the Titans are the 2 wild card teams because I don't know what their direction is. But once April comes around, it's going to get more and more clear as to what these teams are doing. And for us, I think it's really going to be difficult to decipher what exactly they're going to do. Because both these teams, you could make the case, need quarterback. Both these teams need a lot more than just needing quarterback, but that right now is also an issue for them. And for a team like, New England, who wants Travis Hunter, a team like the Giants, who wants one of those quarterbacks, someone's going to get screwed out of someone at the end of the day once the draft is over come April time. So it's going to be a long, I'm trying to do the math. How many days do we have to the NFL draft entirely?
About 90?
I think it's a little bit more than that. 107. 107 days.
I was close.
107 days till the NFL draft itself. So we got a long time till we get to that point in the season. And we would be remiss, Johnson. We talk about some of these college players. We still have a college football playoff to talk about. That's almost over. Next week, back here on the show, we'll be not only recapping Wild Card Weekend in the NFL, but we'll be recapping the semifinal matchups in this year's college football playoff, and then breaking down our last preview of the season, the national championship game, with two of the last 2 teams. We'll have to see who those last 2 teams are once this weekend ends. First game kicking off on Thursday, so it should be a fun time for us here on the show. But for this week, that is going to do it for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. We are now into wild card weekend in the National Football League as all of these teams try to vie for a Super Bowl championship. We have 14 to go teams right now. We'll see who gets to next week in the divisional round, trying to get one step closer to a Super Bowl. Big matchups include the Vikings and the Rams, Buccaneers and the Commanders, Packers, Eagles, the Texans, Chargers, Steelers, Ravens, Broncos, and Bills. Should be a fun wild card weekend this week in the National Football League. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas Don't Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your weekend and enjoy your NFL wildcard week.